And we are back on the Zero Hour. With us, returning to us at the Zero Hour is Travis Waldron, who is a reporter and blogger for Think Progress at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Travis has, among other things, he has a political background and has written on a number of topics, but is also, or has been, a sports writer. And we're now going to talk on the intersection of sports and politics and economics, another area of great interest to us here. So, Travis, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, listen, I see. Absolutely. So you've been working the Redskins beat. Now everybody knows, I'm sure all our listeners know, most of them know, Washington Redskins, a name considered offensive, brought before the patent office, challenged on legal grounds because it is an offensive name. Patent office invalidated the name. There's going to be appeals and so on. But I guess before we get into the details of what's going on with the Redskins, you've been working this beat for a while now. What's it like to work the Redskins? I mean, it's in some ways, it's nuts that this story exists in the 21st century. What's it like working this beat?
Oh, it's fascinating. There's so many different sides to it and so many different issues of, whether it's, people arguing that it's just a name and the NFL has made that argument, the team has made that argument that it's an honor, and to hear the stories from the Native American side has been really interesting. It's been a big learning experience for me. It's easy to look at the name, I think, and see it as a racial moniker and see it as a problem, but to hear the background and the reasons why it's important to change it in the eyes of Native Americans and the activists in this fight is something that I've really learned from and gotten a much deeper understanding of both this issue but also larger Native issues that are in this context and can be put in this context. So it's been something that I've enjoyed both from a journalistic perspective, but also, as someone with an interest in the history of it and the history of how these names came about in sports and just the general history of our country.
Well, one of the things I love about your answer is, I feel the same way. Is one, that just the interest in the world around us, but secondly, it sounds like you don't mind even like having your own opinions or worldview kind of stretched or altered or changed by a story you're covering. And at least that's the way I felt. That's the way I felt covering the Yes All Women. It's just, I was always considering myself a feminist, but yeah, I never thought about that. And for those of us who are willing to change, that's kind of a good feeling, right?
Right, I think that's it. I think, like, if you would have asked me, let's say 2 years ago, what I thought about the Redskins name, I would have said, that, yeah, it's potentially problematic. It could probably be seen as a racial moniker. It could be, I could see how it was offensive to people. I would not have understood how deeply offensive it is to a lot of people and the history of what that word has meant to people, and also the research, the academic research that people have pointed me toward in the last year to show that how these names, and not just the Redskins, but other Native American imagery in sports kind of perpetuates larger issues that are facing the Native American community. And frankly, because they're facing the Native American community, are facing our country and people who care about addressing poverty, mental illness, alcoholism, all these different issues that are seen as very prevalent in the Native American community, they have tied back to this problem in its own way. Not to say that the Redskins name or Native American imagery solely explains any of those problems, but just that it's very intertwined with all of them.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and one of the things, you get you get these people who say, well, here's a study that says that in the 1800s, Redskins was a word used by Native Americans themselves. Therefore, it's not offensive, which I totally do not get or endorse, because, I mean, if you know anybody who speaks Yiddish, Yid is a word for Jew in Yiddish, but I don't think the Washington Yids would go over well. So why do people feel so compelled to defend this name? I mean, to me, if I called you Trav and you said, I don't like that, I'd say, okay, I wouldn't make a big issue about it's inoffensive. I just say, okay, you don't like it. I'll call you what you like to be called. Why is this something that people are academically researching and hiring lawyers? Why don't they just say, well, people find it offensive, we'll change it?
Well, I think there's a very deep psychological tie to the way we view sports and the way we view our sports teams. If you're simply a fan of this team, you know Redskins because of this team. You don't know that history, and you shouldn't even really be expected to know that history. It's not something that's taught, in high school or anything. We learn about Indian issues, but we don't learn the deeper side of them. Yeah, and there's also a monetary aspect. If you're the team, why do you want to? This is one of the most valuable sports teams in the world, not just in the NFL, not just in the country, but in the world. And to develop a brand for 80 years and then think about changing it is a major undertaking. So, it's easy, I think, to want to defend the name if you only view it through those lenses. And it's once you're confronted with the rest of it, it makes it a lot tougher to defend. The problem is that those forces are very strong.
Well, and I think you're right, absolutely, but I think there's another dimension of it too, particularly in the conservative pushback. I'd be curious your thoughts, which is, I think there's this kind of like childlike, don't tell me what to do.
Definitely.
I like the name Redskin. Yeah, so what do you do about that?
Well, I think there's two sides of that, right? The one is childlike, I don't want to be told what to do. The other is that people don't want to be told they're racist when they don't think they're racist. And I think that's one thing that even maybe needs to be explained better is like it doesn't mean, if you think this name is just a name, it doesn't mean you're a racist. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily prejudiced. It means that you don't fully understand what this word and this name mean to the Native American community, and they are trying to do their best to educate people about that and change that. They're not, a lot of the Native American activists I've talked to have said, look, we don't oppose the football team. We don't oppose the football team's fans. We oppose the name. And it's because of what that name does and what they view it as and what it means to them. So I think, they've taken a very strong stance of kind of an educational approach on this toward fans. Where it's been more confrontational is toward Daniel Snyder, the team's owner, toward Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, because they have not really shown a willingness to engage in that educational conversation and address it as if with the respect that it probably deserves.
And look, besides the financial interests of Snyder and Goodell and everything, look, I get that change is uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. I remember when Mrs. was replaced with Ms. It's like it's a habit change. People don't like change. Okay, but I mean, I guess in the minute we have left, how do we educate those people that, hey, in this case, it's important, and change is just something we need to accept? How do we educate? How do we spread that message?
I actually think the Native American activists have done a very good job of engaging in that conversation. When you see ads like the one that they produced around the Super Bowl that then ran on the NBA Finals, the ad was titled Proud to Be. And it was a very basic ad that just showed Native Americans kind of living their lives. And it used a whole bunch of labels. It said things like teacher, mother,
we can't,
father, all of those
unfortunately,
things.
We're out of time now, unfortunately. I'd love to talk to you about this some more, but that was a great ad, and you're doing great reporting on this over at Think Progress. So, Travis Waldron, as always, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
And that's it for this week's edition of the Zero Hour. Join us next week, same time, same place. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.